Australia's involvement in the First World War began when Britain and Germany declared war on the 4th of August 1914. Both Prime Minister Joseph Cook and the opposition leader Andrew Fisher, who were in the midst of an election campaign, pledged full support to Britain. The outbreak of war was greeted in Australia, as in many other places, with great enthusiasm. From a population of less than 5 million, 416,809 Australian men enlisted. After 4.5 months of training near Cairo, the Australians departed by ship for the Gallipoli Peninsula, with troops from New Zealand, Britain and France joining them. The Australians landed at what became known as Anzac Cove on the 25th of April 1915 and established a tenuous foothold on the steep slopes above the beach. The Great War was the first armed conflict in which aircraft were used. About 3,000 Australian airmen served in the Middle East and France with the Australian Flying Corps, mainly in observation capacities or providing infantry support. Australian women volunteered for service in auxiliary roles as cooks, nurses, drivers, interpreters, munitions workers and skilled farm workers. While the government welcomed the service of nurses, it generally rejected offers from women in other professions to serve overseas. Australian nurses served in Egypt, France, Greece and India. They were often in dangerous conditions or close to the front, where they were exposed to shelling and aerial bombardment. The effect of the war was also felt at home. Families and communities grieved following the loss of so many men and women increasingly were assuming the physical and financial burden of caring for families. Anti-German feeling emerged with the outbreak of war, and many Germans living in Australia were sent to internment camps. Censorship and surveillance increased as the conflict continued, and social division also grew, reaching a climax with the bitterly contested conscription referendums held in 1916 and 1917.
James was the first to go overseas. He enlisted in 1914, and then his other three brothers went. My mother was 11 years old, and she was very, very distraught to think her brothers were going away, but not only going away, but going to something terrible called war, which sounded very frightening to her. So it was a time when my grandparents were very, very proud that their boys had enlisted and volunteered, but of course they were in fear of what would happen. Tragically, it seemed to be put around that the war was going to be very short, that all those boys could be home by Christmas, and wow, how exciting, what an adventure. Off we'll go, do a bit of fighting, and home we'll come. And of course that didn't happen. So they set off and they were on their way to Europe, but diverted to Gallipoli and Turkey, where we had that tragic loss of life. And yes, it still upsets me even to think about Gallipoli, so I won't go into that. There's been lots written, and it's important to know because it was a terrible loss, and we should know about loss as well as victories. Yes, I've got a photo of the lock of hair, and that was sent to Jim by Elsie because she did send photos of their daughter, but Margaret had lovely curly blonde hair, so she took a photo of it and sent it to Jim, and that was something he treasured dearly because he didn't see his daughter until 1919 when he finally got home. So that was, yes, I suppose it happened to a lot of soldiers that they had children born that they hadn't seen. The football team he played in, he was captain of Keeler football team, and he was quite a big man. He was 5'11" and weighed 14 stone. So he was, yes, I think he was a bit of a star footballer, and he loved his football. In another letter from another lad sent to his mother in 1916, this boy wrote, I've got his name but I can't think of it, Roy. He wrote to his mother that he wouldn't be playing football with Keeler today, this Saturday, And I thought, it's lovely, here he is way over there, and he's thinking, this is a Saturday and I should be back home playing football. So football was very important to Keilor boys, very important. He became very, very nervous of moonlight. He said, living in Keilor, lovely fresh air, beautiful skies, stars, and then all of a sudden in France, he was really, really nervous and frightened of moonlight because that's when the bombers came over. So as soon as it was a moonlight night, it was very scary. One night he was lying down and a shell burst nearby and fragments came, and he had his jacket over his shoulder. He had in his pocket, he had a wallet, and it was quite thick because it had photos and letters from home. So that was there, he's lying down, and the fragment actually came and pierced the wallet and shot up to his ear. He was wounded in the ear and he lost his hearing in that, but thank goodness, I mean, he could have so easily lost his life if that wallet hadn't contained all that memorabilia from home. I think war is a terrible thing, and reading all the history, I think the more we know about it, the more we learn. It's very important.